Hi, this is Majinoni, and I was talking to a friend of mine, just another level, who also does YouTube videos, and she basically told me I had to do another comic review type thing. So I thought what I would do is do something a little different, since I did the Green Lantern, the History of the DC Universe story with the Sinestro Corps lore, and I decided to do Nemesis the Warlock. Now, why should you care about Nemesis the Warlock? I'm sure you're asking yourself right now. Well, it's a perfectly understandable question, since considering this is a British comic. Just a little history about Nemesis is it was originally created by Pat Mills and Kevin O'Neill. Now, Pat Mills primarily worked on British comics like ABC Warriors, Judge Dredd, Slain, things like that. But he also did do some Marvel and DC work, primarily with martial law, and he also did a Batman story, The Book of Shadows. Now, Kevin O'Neill is important because of what he did with Green Lantern. Along with Alan Moore, they worked together on the Omega Man. O'Neill worked on fill-in issues with the Omega Man, but with Alan Moore, he worked on Tales of the Green Lantern Corps Annual. Now, that book was the springboard for Blackest Night. Now, keep in mind, that was back in 2009, and when that plot point was originally dropped. And it also caused controversy with the Comics Code Authority because, they didn't get approval for it, because there's like a crucifixion scene. And DC said, screw you, we're going to produce this thing anyways without the approval. So, if you can imagine at the time, that was craziness. Now, the gist of Nemesis the Warlock is, now, originally it was 10 volumes, or 10, trades, but you can purchase them in 3 volumes. As you can see, they're kind of thick books. I only have the first 2 books here. My friend of mine's got the first one. And I got these through Amazon UK. You can buy them through Amazon US, but when I originally did my pricing and bought them, they were cheaper actually, just to get them from England and then pay the shipping that way, than to buy it at an inflated rate here and then pay shipping on top of that. Now, what really made Nemesis the Warlock special is because it was a British comic, it didn't follow the rules of the Comic Code Authority. If you know any history about Judge Dredd and how violent that book was, this book, Nemesis the Warlock, was just as violent as Judge Dredd. In fact, it touched on a lot of themes that were, kind of really dark and political. Now, Nemesis was basically a demon who was basically going to be the savior of the universe type thing. He's basically a freedom fighter, and his main opponent was a guy named Torquemada. And basically, he was like a combination of the Spanish Inquisition and the KKK. That's the best way to describe it. Because the Torquemada had these crazy headpieces, as you can see, his people had the pointed hats, helmets and stuff. Now, at the time, it was basically Torquemada and his force was basically trying to rid the universe of alien impurity. He didn't want aliens existing anywhere, and there was mass slaughter of aliens. So what we have is, there's a human trying to destroy aliens, and you have Nemesis the Warlock, an alien demon, who's basically trying to save it all. Now, around this time, this was written during the height of, we had Margaret Thatcher, and there was a lot of political stuff that was going on back then. So a lot of this was, basically written in, with that in mind. It was basically against the government type thing. I guess you can say it's a very political story. Now, along the way you have Nemesis, and he finds people to follow him and help him out. And it's just scenes of extreme violence, racism, and there's all sorts of stuff. And like I said, there's a lot of political, like in the sense of the Inquisition. It's basically we're right, you're wrong, and because you don't believe in what I'm telling you is the truth, we're gonna kill you, type thing. Their rule was absolute. Now, as you can see here, like we also got introduced to like ABC Warriors were in here, and then some of the some characters kind of crossed over that way in that respect with the ABC Warriors, and like sometimes like when I went through this book again after I got it, the only thing I could think of was this is really hard to read because the original 2000 AD books were actually they're like a extreme oversized paper, like newspaper quality, and this kind of changes the format a little bit to more conventional trade paperbacks, in terms of the height and length, or the length and width, I mean. And when you combine that with the artwork, which is both brilliant at times and horribly ugly at other times, and so it makes it very difficult to read. But it's just insane. That's all I gotta say. It's just truly insane what you get in this thing. There's you just don't get this type of story in today's comics. So as you can see in Volume 3, things get cleaned up a little bit. And like I said, there's some really good stuff that pops up every now and then. And then there's also a color section, and there was basically the epilogue story to all of this, which was Nemesis Deadlock. And this is if you guys remember martial law and things like that, a lot of this stuff you can see where all of that it was influenced from stories like this and Judge Dredd. I guess we can almost say it's more heavily influenced by Judge Dredd, but you can see in terms of art style where a lot of this stuff is coming from. Like I said, here's some good examples. It's just there's just so much stuff that's going on these pages that it's not like a traditional comic book where, okay, here's this, and then we'll just color it in one solid color. There's this craziness that's going on all over the place. They don't have traditional backgrounds. There's just so much busyness that at times you just kind of get overwhelmed just because of everything that's going on in this book. I mean, to really get the full impact of every little detail, you can literally just spend 2 to 3 times the amount of time you would on a normal comic just by absorbing all the art. And like I said, you get moments of really cool stuff like this, and then, you get it mixed in with some of this stuff, which just doesn't look that appealing. So, it's one of those that I always say, it's kind of like a read at your own risk, in that some people are really just going to be wowed by it, and other people are going to be I don't know if I can handle it because, the art isn't pretty enough for me. The story is just kind of a little out there for me. It's not, what I'm used to. So if you do decide to take it, look into this a little bit further, just bear that in mind. It's a little bit, as you can see here, it's a little bit different than a normal book. But overall, so when you consider when this book came out, which was in the 1980s, there was really, this was, I guess you could almost say groundbreaking in the direction it's going, the subject matter that it was going, when you compare it to what was going on in the States with Marvel and DC. Marvel and DC, you just had costume superheroes flying through the air with capes and everything, and in 2000 AD, Judge Dredd sees a guy with a cape and he shoots him because he's probably breaking the law doing something, something stupid. And that, it's you just didn't get that kind of a story. It was totally, definitely a more mature subject matter that's involved in these things, and especially when you're dealing with a subject matter like what's going on with the Spanish Inquisition and the hatred and things like that. But you also had lots of action, lots of violence, and insane-looking characters that just drove you to, at least drove me to want to just keep reading it, even though when I originally read this, I didn't get it. I didn't get a lot of the things. I mean, I got the Inquisition part, even though I fully didn't understand what the Inquisition was. I understood. I could pick up on a lot of the principles about what this book was about. But anyways, 2000 AD has a lot of interesting titles in their library. It's a lot different than what you would normally see, and a lot of creators who went to Marvel, like a lot of the European creators, like the British ones, a lot of them have their early work in 2000 AD. So I think if you really want to look at some of the roots of some of the more famous creators, you almost have to look at these books and stories just to see where they came from. I'll probably do a Judge Dredd review later on once I get through some more Marvel and DC stuff and reabsorb some of the Judge Dredd stuff that I read. Because Judge Dredd was also another one which was just like eye candy for extreme violence, and it was awesome. So if you have any comments or questions, just let me know. If any of you guys have read, like Judge Dredd and Nemesis, let me know, because I'm kind of curious to know how many traditional Marvel and DC readers out there that actually been exposed to this, other than the Judge Dredd movie. Rate the video up or down, let me know what you think, and I'll have more reviews up later. So until next